think the biggest thing with grief is that it's not linear, right? It comes in waves. I think that's, women are used to waves. Women are used to a cyclical, a monthly cycle where, 3 weeks we're okay. And then the luteal phase kicks in for many people in reproductive health. And that's like, just a whirlwind of every emotion you could think of. And then rebounding right after you start menstruation.
Mom life is a workout, so I fuel it like one. Throne Sport coffee is packed with protein, electrolytes, and clean caffeine. No crash, just power. Whether I'm hitting the gym or chasing toddlers, it's the boost I actually feel. Grab Throne Sport coffee at Whole Foods starting June 30th because moms deserve a coffee that trains as hard as we do. Welcome back to the Running Wine Mom podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Cieslinski, aka the Running Wine Mom. Today's episode is one that holds deep emotion, wisdom, and resilience. I'm honored to sit down once again with Anita Mirchandani, a registered dietitian, nutritionist, certified fitness professional, and a mom of two. I have had the pleasure of interviewing Anita on episode 47. This time, though, our conversation is different. Over the winter, Anita experienced an unimaginable loss, the sudden passing of her husband. In this episode, she opens up with honesty and strength about her journey through grief and how the grief has impacted her physically, emotionally, and hormonally as a woman and a mother. We talk about how trauma and stress show up in the body through elevated cortisol, disrupted hormones, inflammation, and exhaustion, and what it means to truly care for yourself when everything feels upside down. Anita shares her lived experience, her expert knowledge, and most importantly, her heart. This conversation is about loss, but it's also about hope, healing, and the real raw work of rebuilding your wellness in the midst of it all. So without further ado, let's welcome Anita. Welcome back, Anita.
Hi, Samantha. Thanks so much for having me today.
I want to begin by honoring your story and your loss. Would you be open to sharing about losing your husband so suddenly and how grief has shown up in your body physically, emotionally, and hormonally over these last few months?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, just a little background. My husband actually passed away pretty instantly in December of 2024. He was at an event and basically collapsed, which they declared later was cardiac arrest. CPR wasn't working. And sadly, he was in a smaller town in India. So it was miles away from us. But, a pretty good town that where a hospital is legit, but just to get there and everything, who knows? When you look back, you're not sure about any of it. But the news hit me with quite disbelief because it was just like revisiting the nature of the events over and over again. I was like, I just talked to him. He was like literally going to be boarding a flight soon to come home for Christmas holidays because he goes back and forth, and he's a transatlantic traveler with the global business. And so it was just strange. And I think in the initial days after I got the news and we were all processing everything, I had to actually fly to India that evening because we had to, ID the body and take care of cultural rituals that are related to the passing of a loved one. So it was a quick turnaround time, came back in 3 days, and, then informed my two little boys what had happened because I didn't want to tell them and then just leave so that they'd be in disbelief over the weekend, not have me as their comfort. Had to kind of deliver the news. And I would say in the first 2 weeks after, I mean, of course, everyone's in denial when they lose someone, but it was like a lot of adrenaline. It was a lot of adrenaline pumping as though I was in, fight or flight response mode because I was, I would have a struggle to get up and function in the morning. But then it was like, once I did, I'm like, okay, well, I can't not let these kids just not get through their day. As soon as I came back, I was like, I told my family, my extended family, Rohan, my husband's full family, I was like, we need to get out of here. It's depressing to be here. It's Christmas holidays. Let's go somewhere. And we all scrambled, and a handful of us, some extended cousins and things, we all went to Turks and Caicos. We went to the islands. We stayed there for five full days and got soaked in the sunlight and warmth. And I cannot say how, in the early stage of the whole processing, how therapeutic that was. I think, just knowing that you're in that environment it just feels better, than looking at the gloom of winter season here. And then, sort of coming back, Christmas the Christmas winter break felt very long this year. It was 2 weeks, and then we had, with him being back, we had expected to have a lot of activities and fun around it. But, now that it was like looming, it just felt very long. And, an obstacle to get through. So once we kind of got back to school kicking off, I just shifted all of us into routine. And it was like almost like his passing created a new to do list. So our
Right.
new to do list started in 2025, and that was how to cope with his loss. So everybody started grief group and grief therapy, and we joined a support group for those who've lost an immediate parent or spouse. Me and my two sons, every other Tuesday, we would go unwinding and figuring out ways to channel all the sadness. So, making a list of things that would make these kids happy, talking to them about it, and then starting to execute that. I felt like I was given a new role, and that's what adrenaline does. It's a hormone that basically causes, and women have rushes a lot more than men do because women are always, it's like the nature of how our bodies are wired and we have hormones, men don't, not
Right.
the same way. So it's like we just sort of it propels us to start navigating things differently. It's kind of like a momentous force. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what has, I mean, for the first few weeks, it was weird. I didn't really message people back or respond. And then after that, I was like full, waterfall of message responses. I was like, okay, I'm just going to respond to everyone now. And it was like, and even you, I think we connected in like
Yeah.
early Feb. And I was like,
Right.
just FYI, I don't, and it was kind of, it's just what's, I'm like, I feel like talking now. And it's kind of like that
Yeah.
force.
Yeah, and as you were talking about, you went right away to Turks and Caicos, and I think a lot of people would maybe do the opposite and just sit in. But as you were saying that, I'm thinking, if I need to get over grief, I want to be somewhere that's not in a place that like I'm going to be really like impacted
Reminded.
by it. Yeah, reminded daily. So to kind of give yourself that space, and I think that's a really great thing to give yourself permission to do because again, I think a lot of people follow these rules that aren't really a thing, but like just like through social norms that you need to be sitting in your house and crying as opposed to go somewhere and really heal your body in a different way.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, being able to listen to that adrenaline rush and kind of using that as your momentum in these terms. And this doesn't have to be necessarily related to the grief response of losing someone, but it's more of just receiving bad news
Yeah, for
and
sure.
responding to it.
So from your perspective as both a practitioner and someone living through this, what do you wish more women knew about how grief impacts long-term health?
I think the biggest thing with grief is that it's not linear, right? It comes in waves. And I think that's, women are used to waves. Women are used to a cyclical, a monthly cycle where, 3 weeks we're okay. And then the luteal phase kicks in for many people in reproductive health. And that's like, just a whirlwind of every emotion you can think of
Hmm.
and then rebounding right after you start menstruation. So I think, and then of course, women's life cycles going from the fertility journey into menopause. We're used to those waves. So I
Right.
think, grief and for women experiencing grief, knowing that that experience comes in waves, I think it's more of understanding, well, okay, when I'm not in the wave moment and that wave is not coming on strong, how do I stay on track and how do I function? And obviously that's easier said than done.
Hmm.
But I feel like, at least in this moment, making these small checklists have been very, very helpful for me. So for me in this course of unwinding and managing my grief, making these small to-do lists, which is basically simple functions like, okay, get X, child number one to this sport, get child number two to this sport if you want to, and for me, it was like, if I don't go back and dive myself back into my work, I will sit at home and stare at the wall and find old rom-com movies and just be unproductive. And the thing about that is you're allowed to be unproductive. You're allowed to do that. But I know that my husband set higher standards for myself, for
Right.
me, because he's the reason I became a dietitian. He's the reason that I am channeling myself in this way because he was like, I want you to find something in your life that you're passionate about, but that also gives you this work-life balance that you can manage your children and supporting that whole process,
Right.
while he was able to go do what he needed to do, I was able to have my cake and eat it too, in the sense, while I was doing the heavy lifting and by no means is
Right.
that cake, but I was still able to channel my mind into something that gave me fulfillment. And
Hmm.
so knowing that he's not here anymore, I was like, I can go this route and I can definitely take and give myself grace every day or every couple of days. And I do, and in various ways, but I can also just channel myself into work and start helping people more aggressively and finding ways to just, make sure people don't have, or whatever I can do to contribute to minimal health complications.
Yeah.
as a wellness professional. And that's kind of how I gravitated my grief a little bit.
Yeah. So, what advice would you have for women who are grieving while also parenting and trying to really hold it all together? Like, that is something that is so tough. How do they do it? How do you
I
do it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's talking to my kids. Like my older
Hmm.
son, he's almost 11 and he's really mature, which I'm not saying that everyone's going to have the same relationship or it's this, the same formula, but being able to talk to my kids out loud about my husband has been helpful. Like, you know what daddy would have loved, or if I was making something for dinner, I would have been like, well, daddy would have eaten this with barbecue sauce. You like ketchup and you want garlic aioli. This is so funny. And like, incorporating him in ways that um, consistently remind me of the fact that if he was here, this is how he would do the activity of the moment. Or even be like, guys, you know what? I'm really sad today. Like I've had a really rough morning. Some mornings you're upset and you cry and you don't know why. Well, I'm really sad about daddy today. And in this last few months, it was my birthday at one point. I was sad, and it was my husband's birthday at one point, and I was sad. And, kind of like explaining to the kids, maybe even before those moments come, like, hey, I know it's a birthday and I appreciate you trying to make me feel better, but this is how I'm feeling today. And
Yeah.
so I just feel like you just got to feel and don't hide the feelings. You don't have to do it after dark when the kids are asleep. Maybe sometimes it's natural to do it then because you just don't want to be disturbed about it. But also, letting them know that you're human and that you're missing him and that it's not like a wall for you.
Right.
And another thing also is that I've been advised by several, mental health professionals to find ways to journal, write, tell my story, connect with people, and meditate. I haven't started the meditation yet. I think my brain is too cluttered to get in that moment. But these are all recommendations provided by additional professionals as well.
Yeah. And those are definitely all great recommendations. And with a situation like this, but also with the situation of women who are just in general stressed, we find that our cortisol levels are raised. So let's talk a little bit about cortisol. Can you tell the listeners what actually happens with a woman's body when cortisol is chronically elevated due to stress or trauma?
So, cortisol is an interesting inflammatory hormone. In any given day, if you were to say, okay, I'm going to go get my blood work tested, I'm going to test my cortisol, it might come back normal. Most often, it will come back normal. But in the moment, and what's happening is it's kind of like a replica type pattern. So one of the most common ways to elevate your cortisol or overproduce, like push your adrenals to produce more cortisol, is by drinking coffee first thing in the morning. So when you wake up in the morning and you haven't like really had any water and you're kind of like, oh, you realize your brain, the switch flips and the brain realizes I have to do A, B, C, D, and E all before 8:30. And oh my gosh, that scramble and then that jolt that you have, that caffeine basically tells, it's like you go from, oh, let me massage your adrenal glands to slap it up, like let's get you like, and your adrenals are like, whoa, what just happened here? And so that's kind of how what coffee does. It just like slaps the adrenals and gets them producing cortisol, which makes your muscles and your entire rhythm all warm and start activating everything, and then the body gets to start working. Now, similarly, in stress, in anxiety, in bad news, in the response to all of that, your body starts having that same mental overdrive of, I now have to unravel A, B, C, D, E thoughts in conjunction with living XYZ life. So
Hmm.
that cortisol, what will happen, and this is not necessarily something that's reflective in a week, it's usually reflective in a month to 3 months is when you first start seeing it. It's like a buildup. It's like the constant it's like when you are basically pushing something on and on and on. There's an off period,
Right.
then it's on and on. And it's the way that you rev it up, it's the way that you activate it that is going to have strain eventually. It's going to start telling you, like, I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
And the way that it, for women, a lot of it usually results in inflammatory puffiness. So we start seeing more like weight retention and like sort of this like puffy inflammatory response around our eyes. Kind of looks like we've been crying for a really long period of time, which also may be true, but even in a more robust way. Potentially some skin response, so maybe more hormonal facial acne or redness in the skin, typically hair loss.
Okay.
or response to something related to hair. Maybe you're starting to pull out a little bit more hair. So you might see some thinning as well. And then, of course, unexplained weight gain in areas that are more sensitive. And so the adrenal glands live kind of right behind our stomach, small intestine area, which is why when cortisol is progressively elevated, we see abdominal adiposity weight gain. We see that like little tire area, which it's so crazy because typically women get it when they've gone through childbirth. And a lot of women bounce back in their own way, in their own time, and work on the lower abdomen. But for some, it takes a longer time, and for it just depends on genetic predisposition and things like that. Um, but then cortisol, with the continual prolonged stress, can keep that belly just kind of where it is and unwanted. So those types of immediate symptoms that you would see, as well as severe fatigue, just constantly feeling tired, perhaps some muscle weakness, feeling achy, you'll start seeing and feeling all those things, and everyone will say to you, oh, it must be your stress. Yes, it's actually
Yeah.
the stress. It is, because the stress is causing the cortisol, which is causing difficulty concentrating, not being able to pay attention, and just being snappy and irritable. These are all sort of big pot of these types of symptoms that you will start seeing and feeling during
Yeah.
this response.
So as you're saying this, I'm thinking, well, I immediately have like an espresso in the morning. That's how I start my day. So my adrenal glands are probably like chill. But what are some simple, gentle ways to begin calming cortisol levels, whether it is in the morning, midday, or even like when you are in a high stress season that like you are overly stressed and need some calming tips
So, it's funny because
to
I
lower it?
I read about, other social media, and then there's articles about like people's like what my highly successful morning routine is.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, I get up at 6 a.m. And I'm like, I always stop there because I'm like, did you get up at 6 a.m. willingly, or did you put
right.
an alarm clock? Because when you put an alarm clock to get up at a certain time, that's also an activation point where you're getting your body to get up before its natural rise. What really should happen for all of us, which obviously that's not the nature of life, is we sleep, and when our body, when the cortisol starts getting warm and activating our muscles, that's when we slowly start being like, I think I'm supposed to get awake, and everything starts internalizing, and then your eyes eventually will open. So that is how we're all supposed to wake up, but that's not the norm. But if you were to have some balance between setting an alarm clock for a an hour before when you're supposed to function versus, just sort of waking up last minute and scrambling, I would say find what that time is and
Mhm.
try to get that alarm set for that time in between. And really it's as simple as a few minutes, if we can, is open the first window closest to you. It may not be the sunniest of days, but just getting that natural light, whatever that is outside, and kind of looking into it and opening and closing your eyes allows your body and your like the brain and the gut to sort of say, okay, Anita's getting awake, or so and so is getting awake. And this is like, let's start activating all of the processes between, top to bottom. Training your body, believe it or not, to go to the bathroom every morning is really helpful because it's a great way to start the detoxification process. And so old school, like Ayurvedic principles was that going to the bathroom first thing in the morning is the best way to cleanse for the day, because it's a way of releasing all the bad toxins from the day before, and also a great way to activate your liver and your small, your intestinal community. And
Right.
so if you can train and teach your body how to do that, whether it's drinking regular temperature water or warm water with some lemon squeeze to really activate these processes, and doing it in a habitual way so that it's like, a 3-week period that you kind of stick to this consistent routine to get that rhythm going. Those are all ways to sort of activate your body's rhythm and have your cortisol rise naturally. Perhaps putting on some music and just closing your eyes and kind of listening to some music or something light to start like thinking about, you don't have to journal it, but just thinking about ways you're going to start setting intention for your day, getting
Yeah.
ready to go, whatever. It doesn't have to be long. It really just has to be a few minutes, and you're in your own way kind of getting activated. I started doing mouth oil pulling, which is a fun little process starting I think mid-year last year. I started
Okay.
gargling with like a coconut minty oil for a good 5 minutes every morning, and it has been amazing. Like my
Wow.
breath has been better, my mouth
Ooh.
bacteria is like, I don't have my teeth health, my dental health has improved, and it's kind of this really nice habit. I feel like all like the toxins that are associated in your mouth gets like removed. And so that's one of the ways too you can kind of start your morning routine. But anyway, so yeah, I would try to do any combination of any of these things that suits your schedule, that suit your personality, and really try to push your coffee anywhere from 45 minutes to 90 minutes from when you first wake up,
Okay, that's good
if you
advice.
are a coffee drinker.
Yes, I am. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna switch to maybe some warm water and lemon now, and then I'll do my coffee second. So during periods of high emotional stress, how important is it also to shift toward anti-inflammatory foods and routines?
Yes. So while many of us in stressful moments gravitate towards processed foods, sugar, and alcohol, if there is a way to, in these grief episodes or in these traumatic episodes, I would say lean into your community if they do offer you support in any way, whether it's a home cooked meal or having something ordered for you. I was grateful that this community has been so helpful. People are still messaging being like, hey, can I order you something for dinner this week to take the load off? Or can I drop something I've made? Or can I make something and drop off? And I would say lean into all of that and be honest, like, hey, yeah, if you're making XYZ, this is something my kids would like. It would actually be really great and helpful so that I don't have to worry about their meals for 2 days. Kind of owning into what really would help you and make you feel better would be one of the first steps into managing all of this. And
Hmm.
then, of course, when it comes to foods, traditional anti-inflammatory foods all really go back to the roots of just being wholesome and not processed. And so whether that's incorporating nuts and seeds into every meal, finding ways to increase your fiber so that you're feeling more energetic, you're feeling full longer, it's helping your daily motility rhythm. I call it the balanced plate method. It's easier said and done for me because I know the direct sort of response when I eat that way, how good I feel. So
Right.
because it's ingrained in me, it's not as difficult. But for many people, it will be very difficult to just sort of be like, oh, all of a sudden now with everything I'm dealing with, I'm going to start doing a balanced plate.
Yeah, it's
So
like more stressful.
yeah, it is more stressful and anxiety inducing. So I say this with levity, like none of this is necessarily going to happen overnight, but any one of these habits implemented here and there can help you manage your day better, give you a little bit more energy. But you have to trust it to do it and do it a few times and trust it to see how you're feeling. I would say start your day with any kind of healthy fat, protein, fiber. So something simple as if you like, Greek yogurt, you could do a Greek yogurt bowl with, nuts and seeds and, some blueberries. If you like cottage cheese, you can infuse cottage cheese in your eggs. You can infuse cottage cheese. I make a ton of products with like cottage cheese pancakes, cottage cheese muffins, cottage cheese Belgian waffles. Like I just put batter together with cottage cheese, some, healthy flours, hemp seeds, ground flax seeds, whatever, shaved some banana that might have gone ripe, some shredded coconut, whatever it is, and then just make different versions of that and keep that available to me. And then, lunch really, a lot of people don't have time for lunch, but if you can grab if you have to do it sort of like the crudité Lunchables, sort of charcuterie style, grab some cheese, grab some cucumbers, some cherry tomatoes, grab maybe a boiled egg, grab, crackers, pita chips, whatever it is, and try it that way. Grab a slice of toast, spread something on top, add a green or some veggies, add a little cheese, boom, done.
Yeah.
So something as simple as that. Of course, the ideal thing would be to have a half a plate of any form of vegetables at every meal, but that's just unrealistic in these
Yeah.
times. But yeah, really working towards limiting your alcohol and your sugars, partly because those will continue to aid in the inflammatory response you're already feeling. We all think that a glass of wine, and it does once in a while make us feel better, and you should definitely cater to it if it does. But the prolonged period of it and when you're consuming it and how you're consuming it all makes a difference as well.
Hmm. How about like a pantry staple? Like I like to just grab something and throw it if I don't have time to, make something or it's going to be a long time until I have a refrigerator. What's a pantry staple that you would recommend for anti-inflammatory?
Probably unsalted nuts.
Okay.
So I would say any form of unsalted nuts. You could do pecans, walnuts, sliced almonds, peanuts, pistachios are great for heart health.
Hmm.
And I would, if I have time, I try to make my own trail mix and mix a bunch into a container so I can just grab it out. But if I don't, I'll just grab a few bags and just grab like, I take 4 fingers and this sort of top palm full, finger full, and just put it into a bowl and then just have that and nosh on it.
Perfect. Well, so As if stress doesn't affect us enough, how can grief or chronic stress accelerate perimenopause symptoms or make them more intense?
So in perimenopause, we start seeing the shift towards, progesterone. And so typically when you are grieving and you are more stressed, you might notice additional spotting earlier in your
Mhm.
cycle. You might notice your cycle shortening in general, because when the progesterone sort of gets, it's kind of like a roller coaster, kind of when the onset of the body thinking that, okay, well, now I need to release. And so that cycle gets a lot shorter.
Right.
I would say, though, that's the most common thing, but also typically in perimenopause, we also start seeing like brain fog, we start seeing temperature fluctuations, and perhaps, even related to the spotting early, just sort of vaginal discomfort, itching, discharge. It's like bacteria forming in our
Yeah.
gut and our vaginal tract. So I would say that if you start to feel any of those types of symptoms creeping in, I wouldn't dismiss it as this is normal. I would definitely like connect with a physician and or maybe see if something needs to be optimized with your diet and lifestyle in a way that's easy, that's like one or two small behavioral changes that you could work on, because your reproductive cycle, it has its own, sort of timeline, and it usually follows that of your mother's to some degree. But as much as you can to mitigate or improve some of the perimenopause symptoms so that you don't have to feel the brunt of it as early as it might start, the better it is for you. It's a shitty feeling all around.
Right. Yeah. So what nutritional or lifestyle practices can help ease the hormonal roller coaster of perimenopause?
I would say find time if you can to walk every day. I would say that if you can't control your diet, you can't control everything that you're eating, you can't control the shopping of it or the putting together, the decision fatigue is weighing on you. Can you just find time to walk for like anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes every day?
Mhm.
That itself is improving your blood sugar regulation, which gets compromised with elevated cortisol, blood pressure, which gets compromised with cortisol, and digestion, sort of the mechanism also gets compromised and with the inflammatory state of the body. So walking alone can do that. It helps. It's an avenue for you to release your stress, whether it's through physical movement and or when you're outside and you're walking, whether you're walking with someone, a social walk could be nice because it's a form of therapy by talking through things. But
Yeah.
also, when you're outside, you just start thinking, and it's sort of like a way to release those thoughts.
Mhm.
I would say that would be one of the most holistic ways to manage it.
Right. Yeah. And so how about the emotional toll of perimenopause, especially when layered with grief or identity shifts?
The emotional toll is really hard. You just need to make sure, I mean, if you can find an avenue for yourself to release some of those feelings, thoughts, anxiety, tears, that would be the best way. As I said, whether it's writing the same thoughts over and over and down every day, like today sucks. I really miss you. I wish you were here. Did you see? Because I'm sure you're watching somewhere that, this happened and it made me feel this way and I don't like it. And kind of like
Right.
addressing something as simple as that to, like I said, crying or letting it out or being honest with your feelings in every moment. Many times I'm in the car and I'm at a stoplight and I scream. I actually scream like, what the actual F? Like I just
Yeah.
like I'm like, is this for real right now? Like it's crazy. I definitely think that, and I did, it's funny. I took up boxing for like a hot sec. Like in February, I found a boxing instructor who would come home once a week in the mornings for like 30 minutes. And I did it and it was great because I started feeling the
Right.
release. And then after a while, I was like, okay, no, but I need to switch it up. It's like boxing
Right.
isn't giving me, no. So then I got a weighted vest and I like put that on and I'm like, cause that feels grounding and,
Right.
and I feel like a nice release when I take the weighted vest off. It feels, like that kind of feeling. So I would say play around with all these, you know, take wellness to the next level and play around with all these different types of therapies. Maybe going to a sauna, maybe creating, if you have an opportunity to steam your bathroom and just breathe in steam for like a couple minutes. As the weather gets warmer, can you get 10 minutes of sunlight in the morning before you have that coffee? Can you like take a call while staring at the sun? Like, can you do any of these random weird things and sort of create that, mitigate some of that emotional response?
So what advice would you give to women who are entering perimenopause who feel like their body is changing faster than they can actually keep up with the change?
I mean, that's a lot of us. I feel like one thing would be great is to keep track of what you're feeling. Keep track
Right.
of the symptoms because a lot of physicians are really quick to dismiss things.
Yeah.
They're quick to say things like that's normal or
And
that's your age or whatever. So if you're keeping track of the symptoms, how frequent they're coming, specifically when they're coming, it would be great for someone like even myself as a dietitian to be like, well, what did you eat that day? And maybe that's
right.
the trigger, because in conjunction with perimenopause hormones shifting between estrogen and progesterone, and being those two, of course, and follow FSH as well,
Right.
those three actually being affected by stress hormones, as well as histamine, which is another inflammatory hormone that comes in.
Okay.
I think that it's important to also understand that when you keep track of when you're feeling, I'm sorry, what you're feeling, when you're feeling, and how you're feeling, and what, like 0 to 10,
Like,
we can probably do a little bit more detective work and maybe see what a trigger of that could have been. And a lot of people, believe it or not, have the craziest triggers kick them in the butt in like the middle of their 40s that they've never had before in their life. I had a patient or client be like, all of a sudden I can't eat peanuts anymore because I get redness in my cheek, or I can't drink red wine anymore. I can only drink white wine now. Or when I drink tequila, I like get the runs. Like it's also
right.
it's crazy, like all these things that happen. But these are all the random systems that get compromised during perimenopause. And so
Right.
I feel like my biggest advice would be, if you feel things are coming on quicker than you can control and you're not sure what's propelling it, if you keep track and start writing it down and be thorough, nobody can look at you like you're crazy.
Right.
Sadly, it's sad that you have to almost have proof, but there is, proof in data. So
Yeah.
that would be my best advice.
Well, that's great advice. Well, you've given us a lot of information. If you could leave one message with a woman who is grieving, overwhelmed, or in the middle of a major life shift, what would you want her to know about her body, her healing, and her strength?
My first advice would be, can you find someone who probably isn't in the thick of it like you
Hmm.
are? I will say, when this bombshell happened for us, I was immediately connected to a handful of women who had gone through it. And find those support groups and be able to connect with people who have either experienced the same sort of physicality as you, and taking and learning from them on what things worked for them and how they managed it, and or just being able to know that you're part of a community of people that are going through it together. So I feel like that's the first level of comfort. And the second level of comfort is also that in the initial stages of just accepting the moment, I would say, it's intuitive eating. Go with
Hmm.
whatever it is. There might be periods of time you're not hungry at all. You don't feel like eating. Food makes you feel nauseous. And you might all of a sudden feel ravenous and you might crave a big bowl of pasta. And that's okay, because that's just your body's way of saying, like, it's its way of decompressing. And so I would say, really, really embrace intuitive eating and try to sort of navigate that process in the initial weeks after. Also, if there's any way that you can prioritize your sleep, because I will tell you this, you can't control how you feel in the moments that you're awake, but you can
Right.
control when you shut off and how you shut off. And by sleeping, you at least allow for that sort of the reset of every organ body clock slash mental clock slash gut health clock. Like all of it just can get shut off in a way that is super, super healthy for you. So could you find a way to prioritize sleep in this process? Because you can't obviously control what happens the minute you wake up and how you're going to feel and the roller coaster of emotions that come with it. But at least you can control the sleep part of it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, thank you so much for all of that information. Thank you for sharing your story and all of your emotions. So that's going to bring us to the end of another episode of The Running Wine Mom. Again, thank you so much for being here, for showing up so honestly in this season of your life. Your story, your strength, and your deep knowledge are such a gift to this community. So thank you for being on.
I'm honestly really, it's been a therapeutic, like just being able to talk to you and sort of share some of this and sort
Yeah.
of talk through what I felt and or how I've handled any of it. I think that I'm grateful for you to be able to let me share and have this avenue, but also that, this, if, a handful of your readers read it and realize that they're in the thick of it, something similar, please don't hesitate to reach out to me one-to-one and just talk. Like it's
Yeah.
just good to be able to connect.
Yeah, I'm glad. And like I said, I really appreciate you using, this platform as a way to help so many who need to hear a voice, in the grieving moments. You've given us a powerful reminder that healing isn't linear and that our bodies, especially as women, carry so much more than we often realize. So to anyone who is listening, who's navigating grief, chronic stress, hormonal shifts, or just trying to keep their head above water, again, remember you are not alone. This is a space for both pain and healing, both softness and strength. And whether you are in the early stages of perimenopause, parenting through heartbreak, or simply trying to carry your body again, there is no perfect path. There's just this next gentle step. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend, leave a review, or tag us on socials. You can follow me on Instagram at @therunningwinemom_. And Anita, where can the listeners find you?
Yes, at FITNUT Anita, Fit Nut Anita on Instagram.
Perfect. And I will link all that. So thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, you are strong, you are capable, and you are all amazing. Until next time, keep running, keep sipping, and keep embracing the joy of motherhood. Cheers. And I will be back next Tuesday.